The betting pools around Arena Prime had seen stranger things, but not many. Three-headed Zephyrians wagered against tentacled mollusk traders, while crystalline Vorthon entities clinked their mineral appendages in what passed for laughter. The cosmic joke of the day wasn't the odds, though those were entertainingly lopsided, but the small bipedal creature methodically checking power coupling connections beneath the gravity field generators. 27 cycles undefeated, rumbled Gorvash, whose species had evolved from predatory pack hunters before discovering that intellectual superiority paid better than raw violence. Veltar the Unbreakable hasn't even bled. Against that, his betting partner, a Kelvite whose translucent skin revealed the rapid pulse of excitement, gestured toward the human. The registration system must have malfunctioned. Look at her. She's not even watching the preliminary matches. The human in question wore a standard-issue maintenance jumpsuit, her hair pulled back with the kind of practical efficiency that suggested someone who'd learned early that loose strands and spinning machinery were incompatible. She'd been assigned Section 12B of the arena's technical grid, which happened to include the area directly adjacent to Fighter Prep Bay 7. A coincidence that had somehow escalated into the most expensive mistake in tournament registration history. "I heard she filled out the forms while eating lunch," wheezed Thermach, whose gas exchange membranes fluttered with mirth. "Probably thought she was signing up for overtime shifts." The conversation might have continued in this vein. Comfortable mockery seasoned with genuine bewilderment if tournament director Kexela hadn't chosen that moment to materialize via teleportation platform, his four arms gesticulating in the universal pattern for bureaucratic panic. "The insurance underwriters are having apoplectic fits," he announced without preamble. "They want to know why we're allowing a Category C maintenance worker into a Class Alpha combat tournament." "Because it's hilarious," suggested Thermach. "Because the registration is legally binding under intergalactic combat accords, Section 4, Subsection 12, corrected Gorvash, who'd made his fortune knowing exactly which regulations could be weaponized for profit. Once confirmed and fees paid, no participant may be removed except for medical incapacitation or voluntary withdrawal. Kexela's eye stalks drooped. She paid the fees? Apparently she thought they were equipment rental charges. The human had finished her inspection of the third power coupling and moved on to the fourth, seemingly oblivious to the growing crowd of officials and spectators gathering around the prep bay. Her movements were economical, practiced, the kind of muscle memory that came from years of repetitive technical work in confined spaces. "Has anyone actually talked to her?" asked Kexela. "Supervisor Krent tried," replied a Sumai, junior official, whose name nobody bothered remembering. "She asked if the gravity generators were supposed to be running at 92% efficiency, or if that indicated a calibration problem. What did Krent say? He told her to ask maintenance. But she is maintenance. Yes, that's when it got awkward. The irony wasn't lost on the assembled beings that the most sophisticated combat arena in 3 galactic sectors was being fine-tuned by someone who'd accidentally volunteered to be murdered in it. The human completed her 4th coupling check and consulted a handheld diagnostic unit, frowning slightly at whatever she found there. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice carrying the kind of polite professionalism that suggested she'd spent considerable time dealing with difficult customers. "Could someone check if Fighter Prep Bay 7 is supposed to be drawing 14% more power than the others? I'm getting some unusual readings." The assembled aliens exchanged glances. Veltar the Unbreakable, who'd been using Fighter Prep Bay 7 for his pre-match meditation, was known for his energy-based warm-up routines. The power draw was probably his fault. "That's normal," called back Kexela. "Just log it for routine maintenance review." "Sure thing." The human made a notation on her diagnostic unit and moved to the 5th coupling. Oh, and whoever's scheduled for Bay 7, their warm-up routine is creating harmonic resonance in the tertiary power grid. Might want to let them know before something expensive breaks. She delivered this observation with the casual competence of someone who'd spent years preventing expensive disasters through early intervention. The kind of person who noticed problems before they became catastrophes, who kept complex systems running smoothly, who made sure everyone else could focus on their jobs without worrying about technical failures. The kind of person who was about to face Veltar the Unbreakable in single combat. "This is insane," muttered Kexela. "This is profitable," countered Gorvash, already calculating the odds adjustment. "Do you have any idea how much interest this is generating? Half the sector is placing bets just to watch the spectacle." "What spectacle?" "She'll be unconscious in 30 seconds. "Maybe. But those 30 seconds are going to be very expensive seconds for a lot of people." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Veltar himself, whose reputation for devastating efficiency was matched only by his talent for theatrical entrances. 7 feet of dense muscle and redundant organs, covered in the kind of natural armor that had evolved on worlds where everything tried to kill everything else. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through superior application of violence. "Is this the famous human?" he asked, his voice carrying the amused condescension that came with 7 consecutive championship titles. "She's smaller than I expected." The human looked up from her 6th power coupling, noticed the small crowd that had gathered, and offered the kind of polite nod she might give to any colleague interrupting her work. "Sorry, I'll be out of your way in about 10 minutes, she said. "Just need to finish this inspection cycle." "Take your time," replied Veltar, whose species interpreted such casual interaction as either profound ignorance or spectacular bravery. "I'm looking forward to our match." "Match?" The human paused, her diagnostic scanner halfway to the 7th coupling. "Oh, right. The thing I signed up for. Is that soon?" 23 minutes. "Perfect. I should have these readings uploaded by then." She resumed her work with the same methodical precision, as if discussing an appointment to perform routine maintenance rather than ritual combat to the death. Veltar's expression shifted slightly. The first crack in 7 cycles of unshakable confidence. His previous opponents had spent their pre-fight time in meditation, training, or intimidation displays. None had ever treated him like a minor scheduling consideration. "Tell me," he said, his tone carrying the kind of curiosity that preceded most spectacular mistakes. "What's your combat specialty?" The human finished the 7th coupling and consulted her scanner results. "Combat specialty?" "Your fighting discipline, your weapon preference, your tactical approach." "Oh." She considered this while cross-referencing power distribution patterns on her diagnostic display. "I guess I've taken some self-defense classes. Company policy after the harassment incident in Section C-12. But mostly I just try to avoid situations where fighting seems necessary." The betting odds, which had already been entertainingly lopsided, became mathematically obscene. Veltar laughed. The rich, confident sound of someone who'd just realized that his easiest victory yet was also going to be his most profitable. Prize money, endorsement deals, and betting percentages all calculated into the kind of windfall that bought entire star systems. The human looked up from her diagnostic scanner, studied his expression for a moment, then returned to coupling number 8. 20 minutes, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Better finish these readings first. Arena Prime's combat platform materialized with the kind of technological precision that made insurance underwriters weep and spectators cheer. 200,000 beings across 14 species had gathered to witness what the promotional materials diplomatically called an exhibition of interspecies athletic excellence. What they were actually about to see was considerably more educational. "Ladies, gentlemen, and photosynthetic entities," announced the arena's AI commentator, whose voice carried across multiple frequency ranges to accommodate various auditory systems. "Presenting the reigning champion of 7 consecutive tournaments, the undisputed apex predator of 3 stellar regions, Veltar the Unbreakable." The crowd's response registered on seismic equipment. Veltar emerged from the competitor tunnel with the kind of theatrical flair that had made him the most marketable athlete in known space. His warm-up routine involved pulverizing 3 steel training dummies, each impact generating enough kinetic energy to power a small space station. "And his challenger," continued the commentator, with barely concealed amusement. "Representing, well, nobody officially, the accidental entrant, who apparently thought she was signing up for equipment maintenance contracts. The human." The human walked onto the platform carrying her diagnostic scanner and a small toolbox, which she set down carefully at the edge of the combat zone. Her preparation ritual consisted of checking that her bootlaces were properly tied and rolling her shoulders once to work out a kink. "Fascinating anthropological contrast," observed Dr. Yextai, whose species had evolved from scavengers and therefore possessed an instinctive appreciation for watching other beings make terrible life choices. "Note how the human exhibits no territorial display behaviors, no intimidation posturing, no preparation rituals designed to psychologically destabilize her opponent." "Because she doesn't understand what's about to happen to her," replied his colleague, Professor Menthera. "Their species apparently believes that narrative structure governs physical reality. Something about small defeating large through moral righteousness." "Combat protocols initialized," announced the arena. "Standard rules apply. No weapons, no external augmentation, victory by submission, incapacitation, or opponent exit from combat zone. Participants, acknowledge readiness." "Ready!" boomed Veltar, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never met a problem that couldn't be solved through overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The human raised her hand. "Quick question. Are there any safety regulations about power output near the primary gravity generators? Because if someone gets thrown into Section 12B, it could cascade into a facility-wide system failure." "Combat zone is magnetically contained," replied the arena's safety protocols. "No external infrastructure risk." "Perfect, thanks." She settled into what might generously be called a fighting stance, though it looked more like someone preparing to perform routine maintenance in a cramped space. The opening bell resonated across 14 different audio spectrums. Veltar moved with the kind of devastating efficiency that had made him wealthy. His initial charge generated enough momentum to stop a freight transport, aimed precisely at center mass with the intention of ending this farce before it could become embarrassing. The human sidestepped. Not dramatically, not with flourish or acrobatic flair. She simply repositioned herself 6 inches to the left with the same economical precision she'd used to navigate around power couplings. Veltar's charge carried him past his intended target, his momentum now working against rather than for him. "Interesting," murmured Professor Menthara. "She's treating him like a mechanical system rather than a combatant." Veltar recovered, spun, and launched a series of strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer volume. His species had perfected this technique over millennia of evolution. Rapid-fire attacks from multiple angles, each one capable of shattering reinforced steel. The human redirected them. Every punch, every kick, every devastating blow found itself traveling in a slightly different direction than intended. Not blocked, not absorbed, but guided. the way a maintenance worker might redirect a misaligned component back into proper position. Her movements were small, efficient corrections that turned Veltar's assault into an elaborate demonstration of wasted energy. "She's not fighting him," observed Dr. Yextai, his academic detachment beginning to crack. "She's troubleshooting him." The crowd's enthusiasm was shifting from bloodthirsty anticipation to confused murmur. This wasn't combat as they understood it. Combat involved dramatic clashes, opposing forces meeting in spectacular collision. This looked more like advanced technical support. Veltar paused, breathing heavily. The first time in 7 tournaments that he'd needed to catch his breath in the opening minutes. His opponent showed no signs of exertion whatsoever. "Your kinetic transfer efficiency is about 67%, she mentioned conversationally, the way someone might point out a minor calibration error. "You're losing a lot of energy to rotational displacement. Try keeping your center of gravity about 2 inches lower." "What?" The question emerged as a growl, filtered through Veltar's growing confusion and the universal translator's struggle with technical terminology. "Your stance. It's creating unnecessary torque loads, like when you're trying to apply force to a stubborn bolt. Better to work with leverage than raw strength." She demonstrated by catching his next strike and using it to illustrate proper mechanical advantage. Veltar found himself thrown across the combat platform with perhaps 1/10 of the effort he'd been applying to his attacks. The silence from 200,000 spectators was deafening. "Technical question?" called the human toward the commentator booth. "Is there a time limit on this, or can we take as long as needed? Because he's going to hurt himself if he keeps generating force, loads his skeletal structure isn't designed to handle." Veltar climbed to his feet, no longer certain what kind of contest he was participating in. His opponent was treating their ritual combat like a workplace safety inspection. "You dare offer me advice?" he roared, attempting to reclaim some measure of psychological dominance. "Sorry, occupational, habit. I just hate seeing inefficient systems." She paused, considering. "Though if you want to keep doing things the hard way, that's your choice. I get paid by the hour either way." The casual competence in her voice, the tone of someone who'd spent years preventing disasters through patient technical expertise, was perhaps more unnerving than any war cry could have been. Veltar decided to end this humiliation with his signature finishing technique, the Stellar Crush, a move that had literally reshaped planetary landscapes during his homeworld's ancient wars. He gathered energy from his internal reserves, channeled it through his muscular system, and launched himself forward with enough force to crack continents. The human caught him. Not dramatically, not with superhuman strength displays, but with the same matter-of-fact competence she'd used to redirect his earlier attacks. She absorbed his momentum, redirected his energy, and set him down gently on the other side of the platform. "Okay, now that was just wasteful," she said, shaking her head. "You're generating about 40% more energy than necessary, and losing most of it to atmospheric friction. Plus, your trajectory calculations are off. You're aiming for where I am instead of where I'm going to be." Veltar stared at her, his understanding of physics, combat, and personal identity undergoing rapid recalibration. "Would you like me to show you the correct approach?" she asked. "It's all about working smarter, not harder." The moment stretched like overheated metal, brittle and ready to snap. Veltar stood in the center of Arena Prime, 7-time champion reduced to a case study in biomechanical inefficiency, while his opponent waited patiently for his answer, like a customer service representative dealing with a particularly stubborn software glitch. "Show me?" he repeated, the words emerging in the tone of someone whose fundamental assumptions about reality were undergoing emergency maintenance. "Sure." The human stepped forward with the same professional courtesy she might use to explain a diagnostic readout to a confused supervisor. The problem with your approach is that you're thinking like a hammer when the situation calls for a screwdriver. She moved, not with the explosive violence that combat sports celebrated, but with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent years working in spaces where a single miscalculation could kill everyone in the room. Her hand found Veltar's wrist, applied exactly the right amount of pressure at precisely the correct angle, and suddenly the apex predator of 3 stellar regions was airborne. He landed 12 feet away with the kind of gentle precision that suggested the distance had been calculated rather than accidental. "See?" she called out, brushing off her hands. "Minimum energy input, maximum effect. It's all about finding the system's natural weak points instead of trying to overpower them." The crowd's silence had evolved beyond, stunned into something approaching existential crisis. 200,000 beings were witnessing the fundamental premises of their entertainment industry being debugged in real time. Veltar climbed to his feet more slowly this time, his movements carrying the cautious quality of someone who'd just discovered that the laws of physics were more like suggestions. "That's impossible. My species evolved for combat dominance. Our skeletal structure, our muscle density, our reflexes are all very impressive," agreed the human. "But you're using them wrong. It's like having a precision instrument and using it as a club. But I am the strongest. I am the fastest. I have defeated champions from 16 different worlds." The human considered this while absently checking her wrist chronometer. Probably because they were all trying to out-muscle you instead of thinking about the problem systematically. She paused, then added with the kind of gentle correction that made training seminars bearable. "Also, strongest and fastest don't really matter if you're applying force in the wrong direction." Dr. Yextai leaned forward in the observation booth, his academic excitement overriding his species' natural caution. "Colleagues, I believe we're witnessing something unprecedented. She's not defeating him. She's educating him." Professor Menthera consulted her portable research terminal with the frantic energy of someone whose dissertation was being rewritten in real time. According to the Xenobiological Database, human physiology is classified as standard carbon-based, unremarkable muscle-to-mass ratio, moderate reflexes, average durability. How is this possible? "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Clivex from the philosophy department, "we've been measuring the wrong variables." Down in the arena, Veltar was discovering that 7 consecutive championships had prepared him for many things, but not for having his combat technique critiqued like a quarterly performance review. "You speak as if violence is merely technical knowledge?" "Well, yeah." The human shrugged. "I mean, everything's technical knowledge when you get down to it. Biology, physics, engineering. It's all just different ways of describing how systems work and how to make them work better." She gestured toward his stance with the patient manner of someone explaining basic safety protocols to new employees. "Your species developed those reflexes and muscle structures for a specific purpose, on a specific world under specific conditions. But you're fighting in an artificial environment with controlled gravity and atmospheric composition. You're trying to use evolutionary adaptations designed for Scenario A in what's essentially Scenario Q." Veltar processed this information with the expression of someone whose worldview was experiencing a cascading system failure. "Are you saying that combat is maintenance?" "More like troubleshooting, really. You identify the problem, analyze the available resources, implement the most efficient solution." She paused thoughtfully. "Though I guess there are some similarities to maintenance. Both involve preventing things from breaking down catastrophically." The universal translator struggled briefly with the concept of existential dread, then settled on a low humming noise that conveyed approximately the same meaning. "This is insane," muttered Tournament Director Kexela from his emergency session booth. Our entire industry is based on the principle that superior physical capability determines victory, if technique can override evolutionary advantage. Then we've been selling the wrong product for centuries, finished Gorvash, whose financial instincts were already calculating the implications. Do you have any idea what the insurance actuaries are going to do when they realize that combat prediction models are fundamentally flawed? Back on the platform, Veltar was attempting to process the revelation that his life's work might be equivalent to using a quantum computer as a doorstop. But I trained for decades. I perfected my abilities. I studied the combat techniques of hundreds of species. That's actually the problem, explained the human with the patience of someone who'd spent considerable time helping colleagues understand why their preferred methods weren't working. You studied combat techniques, but you didn't study combat. What's the difference? Techniques are specific solutions to specific problems. Combat is the underlying system that generates those problems in the first place. She gestured toward the arena around them. This isn't your natural environment. I'm not using your species' standard attack patterns, and the victory conditions aren't the same as evolutionary survival. So why would evolutionary combat techniques be optimal? The question hung in the air like a maintenance request that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Veltar stared at her for a long moment, then began to laugh, the sound starting as bitter amusement and gradually transforming into something approaching hysteria. You're telling me that I've been approaching combat incorrectly my entire life. Not incorrectly, the human corrected gently, just inefficiently. The laughter stopped abruptly. Not funny. The human's expression shifted slightly, not to fear or concern, but to the kind of professional focus that suggested someone had just escalated a routine service call into an emergency situation. No, she agreed quietly. It really isn't. What happened next took approximately 2.3 seconds and redefined several areas of theoretical physics. Veltar launched himself forward with every ounce of strength, speed, and desperate fury that 7 championships had failed to teach him to control. It was a perfect demonstration of everything the human had just explained was wrong with his approach. Maximum effort applied with minimum intelligence, evolutionary programming overriding tactical analysis. The human sidestepped, caught his momentum, and redirected it downward with the same casual competence she'd used to diagnose power coupling problems. Veltar hit the platform's surface with enough force to crack the reinforced flooring, then lay still. She knelt beside him to check for injuries, her manner shifting from technical consultant to concerned colleague. You okay? That looked like it hurt. Veltar groaned, which the universal translator helpfully rendered as approximately 17 different expressions of physical and psychological anguish. I think you broke my understanding of reality. Yeah, that happens sometimes. Try not to take it personally. It's more of a systems integration issue than a personal failing. She helped him sit up with the same gentle efficiency she'd used to end their fight. The good news is that once you understand the actual problem, the solutions become pretty obvious. It's like the difference between hitting a stuck component with a hammer versus figuring out why it's stuck in the first place. 200,000 spectators watched the 7-time champion receive first aid from the opponent who just redefined the concept of victory, and slowly began to realize that they were witnessing something considerably more significant than a sporting event. They were watching the moment when the galaxy discovered that humans didn't tell stories about heroes. They told stories about normal people. The silence that followed Veltar's gentle placement in the medical bay stretched long enough for several species to evolve new forms of anxiety. Arena Prime's emergency response protocols had activated automatically, flooding the facility with the kind of bureaucratic panic that typically preceded insurance claims measured in planetary GDP units. Medical status report, demanded Dr. Jexpie, the arena's chief physician, whose 6 eyes were performing independent triage assessments. Spinal integrity, neurological function, pride levels. He's fine, interrupted the human, who was helping Veltar stretch out what appeared to be a pulled muscle. Maybe some bruised ribs from the impact, but the platform absorbed most of the kinetic energy. That's what it's designed for. She paused, considering. Though you might want to check him for mild concussion, not from the fall, from having his assumptions about physics restructured so quickly. Dr. Zhexpai's medical scanners confirmed what the human had assessed through simple observation. 1 slightly embarrassed champion, 0 permanent damage, and approximately 14 different pharmaceutical companies scrambling to develop treatments for existential shock. Remarkable diagnostic accuracy, admitted the physician. Are you trained in xenobiological medicine? Not really, but I've seen plenty of workplace injuries, and the symptoms are usually similar across species once you account for basic anatomical differences. The human consulted her chronometer. Again. Speaking of which, I should probably get back to work soon. Is the tournament over, or do I need to fight someone else? The question catalyzed the kind of administrative crisis that generated interdepartmental memorandums for decades. Tournament director Kexela materialized via emergency teleportation, his 4 arms gesticulating in patterns that roughly translated to, "What do we do now?" Technically, he announced, victory by opponent incapacitation means you advance to the championship bracket. Championship bracket? The human looked puzzled. I thought this was just 1 match. The tournament structure involves 16 preliminary rounds, followed by elimination brackets, culminating in... How long does that take? Approximately 6 standard days. Oh. The human's expression shifted to polite concern. I can't take 6 days off work. Union regulations are pretty strict about extended leave requests, and I've already used my allotted break time for today. She brightened, apparently struck by a helpful idea. Could someone else cover my remaining matches? I'm sure there are people here who actually know what they're doing. The assembled officials exchanged glances that conveyed roughly the same information as a small library's worth of crisis management literature. In the observation decks, alien anthropologists were conducting emergency research sessions that would reshape their understanding of human culture. Preliminary findings are disturbing, reported Dr. Yextai to an emergency assembly of the Galactic Anthropological Society. We've been analyzing human entertainment media under the assumption that their stories represented aspirational fiction. David versus Goliath, underdogs triumphing against impossible odds, the weak overcoming the strong through moral superiority. And, prompted Professor Menthara, though her expression suggested she'd already reached the same conclusion. They weren't stories about heroes. They were documentaries about normal people. The implications rippled through the assembled academics like a cascading power failure. If humans considered their maintenance workers to be representative of baseline capability, what did that suggest about their military personnel? Their athletes? Their specialists? Emergency session, called Dr. Klivex. We need to recalibrate every assessment we've made about human civilization. Meanwhile, in the arena's communication center, Interstellar News Network was experiencing the kind of ratings crisis that made shareholders weep. Their combat sports division had just broadcast 7 minutes of what appeared to be advanced technical training, disguised as entertainment. How do we market this? Demanded production director Velkash. Our entire advertising model is based on spectacular violence between evolutionary apex predators. We can't sell tickets to watch efficiency consultations. Maybe we can, suggested his assistant, whose species had evolved from accountants. Do you know how many civilizations have optimization problems? We might have accidentally discovered educational content. Back on the platform, the human was conducting an impromptu Q&A session with increasingly frantic tournament officials. So this level of physical capability is normal for your species? Asked Kexela. I guess. I mean, I took some self-defense classes after the harassment thing, but mostly I just try to stay in shape for work. Maintenance jobs require a lot of crawling around in tight spaces. And the combat analysis? The biomechanical assessments? That's just basic troubleshooting methodology. Same principles apply whether you're diagnosing a malfunctioning gravity generator or figuring out why someone's fighting technique isn't working. Kexela's expression cycled through approximately 14 different stages of realization, finally settling on something that resembled terror. What do your military personnel do? Military personnel? The human looked confused. You mean like soldiers? I don't really know. I work in civilian maintenance, different department entirely. The conversation was interrupted by the distinctive chime of an incoming communication. The human reached into her pocket and retrieved a standard-issue work communicator, checking the message with the same casual efficiency she'd applied to everything else. Oh, good. My supervisor wants to know if I've finished the gravity generator inspection yet. She looked up apologetically. Sorry, but I really do need to get back to work. Are we done here? Done. Kexela's voice climbed several octaves. You've just fundamentally challenged the theoretical basis of interstellar combat sports, defeated our reigning champion using techniques that apparently qualify as routine maintenance procedures, and now you want to return to your regular job duties? Well, yeah, the generators won't calibrate themselves, and if I don't get the diagnostics uploaded before my shift ends, the night crew will have to start over from scratch. She paused thoughtfully. Plus, I promised to check the power couplings in Section 15C before lunch tomorrow. She gathered her diagnostic scanner and toolbox with the same methodical care she'd shown throughout the entire encounter. Thanks for letting me participate, though. It was educational. Educational? Sure. I learned that my self-defense instructor was right about leverage being more important than strength, and that most problems really can be solved with basic troubleshooting principles. She headed toward the exit, then turned back with an afterthought. Oh, and if anyone wants recommendations for workplace safety training, I can put you in touch with our Human Resources Department. They have some really effective conflict resolution programs. She paused at the edge of the platform, struck by another helpful idea. Actually, you might want to consider reorganizing your whole tournament structure. The system seems designed to reward inefficiency over results, which creates all kinds of systemic problems. I could write up a brief analysis if that would be useful. That would be appreciated, managed Kexela, whose capacity for processing existential shock was reaching its operational limits. The human nodded and headed for the exit, her footsteps echoing across the now silent arena. 200,000 spectators watched her disappear into the maintenance tunnels, leaving behind a tournament, a champion, and an entire civilization's understanding of human mythology scattered across the platform like the remnants of a controlled demolition. In the emergency session chamber, alien officials were frantically revising their species classification databases. Insurance actuaries were suffering collective nervous breakdowns, and military strategists were questioning everything they thought they knew about threat assessment. The human's communicator chimed again as she reached Section 12B. Another message from her supervisor, asking if she'd remembered to log her break time properly. She smiled and typed back a quick confirmation, then got back to work calibrating gravity generators for people who thought they understood the universe. Her shift ended in 43 minutes, after which the really competent people would take over.